TUFF SHIFT. Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of TUFF SHIFT, the podcast where we unpack all that goes into surviving the job and living the dream. My name is Patrick Murtagh, and I, of course, am your host. And I just wanted to start this week's episode by saying, ah! Don't make me go back. Please get me out of here. I, uh, you know, when you create a podcast called Tough Shift while you're still working shifts in the industry, you sometimes get what you ask for. And there's been, well, let me just say, I cannot wait until this podcast is not only fully monetized, but is more of a reminiscent stroll down memory lane and not what it currently is, which is the live coverage, breaking news, up to date shit show that it is. You're in it with me, and it just seems like customers are getting worse, managers are getting worse, my coworkers. I love you, but some of you, what do you think? Do you know what a job is? Do you know what a job? It's been it's been rough, and last week was no exception. Last week might have been a record breaker. I had had a few days off, which was really nice. I went out of town, came back in, recharged, refreshed, just ready for the next disappointment. And let me tell you, my restaurant did not let me down. But it's kind of like what I tell, the children that I've taken care of, like, let your upset kind of be uh, set by your level of surprise, right? So let's set our upset based on how surprised we are. So, did you know that this was going to happen? Did you know that this was a possibility? Cool. So let's still be upset about it, but let's kind of gauge that and keep it in relationship to what a shocker it is. So if it's not a shocker, let's be upset, but let's know we saw it coming and see how we can get past it, right? So I get to work, and no sooner than I clock in to where it's not just that like shit starts hitting the fans, but it's like these little dumpling turds just start boom, 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 boom going to the fans. And I'm like, cool, this is not new. This is not unexpected. So I just decided to make a list, and I started writing down everything as it was happening in the moment. And boy, I almost ran out of ink. Every 3 feet, I had to stop and take a note. And thankfully, I got cut early, and randomly, my fiance was still up when I got home, which is not something that usually happens. He's usually long asleep by the time I get home. And I'm usually working later. So it was just one of these things where it's like, oh wow, we're still up. Oh my God, good to see you. I open the door, and I'm greeted with a, hey love, how was work? Which was a knee-jerk reaction because I never want to talk about work. You can ask me any question. I don't want to talk about work. If there's something great that happens at work, I will tell you. But it was coming from a sincere place, and it was just kind of like a boom, a normal question you ask. And so I told him, I said, well, funny you ask. It sucked. We can move past that point. But I started writing things down. I started making a list. Anytime somebody dropped the ball, anytime somebody did something kind of stupid, relatively stupid, what we expect for that stupid person to do, I just made a list. And he stops me and goes, wow, that's great. I'm really happy to hear that because that's a wonderful tool. And I said, I know, because usually I make all these mental notes and then they get stored in the cloud that is my creative ADHD brain. And then when I need them, I just don't know where they're filed. And it's like, what was that thing that happened on Thursday? What was that thing that so and so did? And I can't recall them until I'm trying to get to sleep and it's 2 a.m. and it pops right in my head. So I have this list. So when I record the podcast on Monday, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk shop. I'm ready to unpack. And he's just looking at me wide eyed, just so you know, he's a therapist. And he said, well, I meant that that's a great tool for coping. to write down what's upsetting you so that way you can acknowledge it and put a name to it. And I looked right back at him and I said, "That's great and thank you, but I will cope once this podcast is monetized. Until then, this is a tool for me to talk shit." And I made that list and I couldn't wait till Monday. And then Friday and Saturday shifts came by, and I didn't need to make lists for those shifts because what happened was tattooed in my brain. The level of fuckery and incompetence and how did you make it to the egg first type of thoughts are just, I mean, they're swimming there so much so, so intense, so upsetting that I did something I never do because I was raised by parents who taught me never to do shit like this. I called out. I said, "I'm not going in." Everyone calls out with no repercussions. Everyone shows up drunk with no repercussions. I don't feel sorry and I don't feel guilty for taking a day for myself when this is the shit that's happening non-stop. So I tried to be nice about it and I reached out and I said, "Hey, do you need me to work brunch tomorrow?" Because there's 4 servers on, there's 2 bartenders, and there's really not the reservations to support that. And I get a response almost immediately like, "Yeah, we think it's better if you come in just in case. We want to be prepared." And I didn't respond. I went to bed and I woke up the next morning and I said, "I will not be in today. I am hitting a wall and I'm at a place to where if it's I don't come in today or I don't ever come back." And I just never checked the messages. So I could have lost my job. I could have whatever, which I probably wouldn't because, again, people call out left and right and still get great shifts and great sections. So I was like, I think I'm pretty good because I'm one of the 2 people that actually works there. And it was, I opened the message later and I was like, "Okay, thanks for the heads up. Hope you get rest." Okay. And I was ready for Monday to just come in hot and go real deep with this episode. But thankfully, our amazing and talented guest needed to reschedule because he's so amazing and talented, and the industry just wants their hands all over him that he had to like postpone, which is wonderful because I would love for my guest to be like postponed because of work. And it worked out for the best because I needed some time away from these shifts. I'm still ready to talk shit and unpack some of this, especially since today's guest had mentioned in our little pre-interview that he's ready to talk about incompetent and pedantic managers. So buckle up, babies. Who knows what we bring up? Who knows what's triggered? Who knows what we trigger for each other? It's going to be like a gun show, a spiritual gun show, not a real gun show of stories going back and forth. But before we get to today's guest, I'm jet lagged, and I didn't even leave the time zone. But you can be jet lagged just by going on any flight, no matter where you go to. I went to Vegas this week, and I went because our guests, our friends over at Shaken and Stirred, the story of flair bartending, had their world premiere on Tuesday, March 25th, and they invited me to come. So I got a plane ticket. My friend from high school picked me up. I stayed with him. I had a real quick Vegas tour. Went to this incredible, incredible premiere at the Beverly Theater in Las Vegas. And let me tell you, I saw a screener before the premiere, before I did the interview, so I could kind of see what it was about and make sure I was getting to the heart of the matter. And it felt like I was watching it for the first time. It was so wonderful. The new edits, what they had added from the clips, the way they had put it together, and just being in a room of industry people, of hospitality industry people, of filmmakers, just so much love and so much knowledge in that room of shared experiences. It was phenomenal. And so I just want to say to everyone at Shaken and Stirred, which you can go to shakenandstirredthemovie.com and purchase your streamer right now to see this incredibly heartfelt, revealing, and uplifting documentary. It's so uplifting. I can't believe how wonderful these human beings are. And it was my first red carpet as a podcaster, and I got my first Getty image, which you'll know when you see it because I will post the shit out of that. But to be on that red carpet, to meet these people that I interviewed, and to meet all these other people who are connected with the film, it was phenomenal. And afterwards, went upstairs to the after party, shook a few hands, met some people, congratulated everyone I could. And then there was an after, but I was like, these are industry people, and it's not just industry people. These are bartenders, and I have to get on my flight the next morning. So I decided to skip the after, and I hope they've fully recovered by now. But I still wanted to treat myself for this. So I looked up, I was like, where can I get nachos in downtown Las Vegas that won't break the bank and also doesn't look, scuzzy? And I swear to God, I typed in Mexican restaurant into my Google, and I got, for those of you watching, a Nacho Daddy. Nacho Daddy popped up, and I was like, I mean, that's kind of my brand. And I'm, now that I'm out of the game, I'm like, man, I could have used that as my grinder name. But you live, you learn, you rate this podcast 5 stars. Okay, Nacho Daddy, you were phenomenal. I bought 2 shirts because it was that amazing. The nachos were phenomenal. The service was phenomenal. The margarita was the size of my head, which is the only requirement other than having tequila in it that I want from any margarita. It was, the best way to end that 24 hours little trip. So go check out Shaken and Stirred, the documentary. Go check out Nacho Daddy. That's not Joe Daddy. It's somebody's daddy, but everyone's welcome. I'm an asshole. I'm not going to edit that out. Anyways, we're getting back to today's guest, who I cannot wait to start unpacking things with. Let me tell you, this guy is a phenomenal human being, a phenomenal talent. And I met him in the most random of New York ways you can have. Like, these are only the ways you meet people in New York. As I've mentioned a few times on this podcast, I was part of a gym cult in New York City for musical theater actors, for Broadway actors, for aspiring Broadway actors for a long time, where I met today's guest's wife. And she was on Broadway. She is on Broadway. She's always on Broadway. She's amazing. And I was working in restaurants, and the restaurant and Broadway schedule lines up in New York because the performers and Broadway hopefuls hold up the walls of hospitality in New York City. So we were always in the same class together. And I got to know what a phenomenal human being she was, and just became addicted to her energy, only to find out that she's my neighbor because were getting rid of a couch. And they lived up the street from me. So $80 and a U-Haul later, I got this new couch and met her equally phenomenal husband, and was like, of course, Gabby's amazing. Of course, she's married to this tall glass of water. So gays, just trust me, go ahead and give him a follow. You won't be disappointed by the content. He does his part to keep social media shirtless, which is always wonderful. But aside from the thirst traps, aside from all that, this is somebody with over 20 years in the industry who has done it all. He's done TV, he's done film, he's done commercials. You have seen him in Chicago PD, Pretty Little Liars, Blacklist, and more. The Blacklist, and more. He is an actor, a writer, a producer, and award-winning at that with his own films. He is just an incredibly charming and engaging human being, and I know that you will be as charmed by him as I was when I first met him. So let's not waste any more time. Nathan Reid, welcome to the show. Hello, hello.
Phenomenal intro. Thank you so much, man. That was like really humbling and amazing. It's always weird when you like hear your own accolades and you're just like kind of sitting there going, "Oh yeah, I've been around forever. I've done so much stuff." Do you know what I mean?
I
So
I am a tall glass of water. Yeah, it's nice to hear that back sometimes,
yeah,
There's people live in deserts and they need tall glasses of water every now and then.
really do
So
give thirst traps on Instagram. It is my pleasure and honor, and it's the least that I can do.
But it's really funny because it's like it's not just because some people just lead with thirst, and that's all they have to offer. And that's great because, support the troops. But that's just like the frosting on the cake because you have such an amazing talent, you have such an amazing career, and your thirst traps are not always just thirsty, they're silly as fuck and they're
Oh God,
hilarious. And we need all of that. But before we get into that, I need to ask you the very first question I
yeah.
ask all my guests. Nathan Reid,
Mhm.
what was your gateway job into this industry of being that stereotypical actor, paying the bills and surviving in hospitality?
Okay, so first off, we have to give credit and kudos to calling it the gateway job because it's wonderfully titled. Because you immediately think like, oh, the gateway drug that led me into a life of debauchery. You're like, yeah.
You're the
So
first one to acknowledge that, so thank you.
yeah, my answer to this is not going to. I'm pretty much going to be the only person that has this answer, which is my first serving job was when I was 8. And you didn't even know this about my history about whatever it was. So
No.
the Cliff Notes version of Cliff Notes version is I would spend my summers in Wyoming because my grandparents were there, and it was like literally a town of, I'm not joking, 100 people. That's not an exaggeration. It says it on the actual population. It's a town called Centennial. It is between the Saratoga Mountains and Laramie. Laramie is where their college is, but Laramie only has like 28,000 people. So there is nobody in Wyoming. And I started going and spending my summers there when I was about 5 and 6 years old, all the way to 14 years old. And I never knew why I went. It was just super cool of like, oh, I'm going to go spend a couple of months, you know what I mean? Like hiking the mountains and working on ranches and, learning how to ride horses and driving tractors. I mean, everything that you would think a 7-year-old would be doing. That's what I was doing. And I remember it was the summer that I was 8 years old. And I told my grandfather, I was like, I'm actually really bored. Not in the sense of like, a kid who, because obviously video games weren't even a thing at that point. They did not exist. I had watched all the action movies that I could possibly watch. And I was like, I need something to do. And so he's like, well, why don't we go and talk to Murray, who is the owner of this cafe that's called Murph the Surfs. And I was like, that's because you're 8 years old. And like working in a restaurant sounds actually insane.
Yeah.
Insane. And I went and talked to Murray, and Murray's like, well, I'm sure, you know how to like wash dishes, right? And I was like, yeah. And I became a dishwasher when I was 8. And then by the end of the summer, I was waiting on tables and taking orders at 8 years old. So I did that from when I was 8 until when I was 14. So my gateway drug was $3.50 an hour, which for an 8-year-old, when I got my first check for $116, I literally
Huge.
thought I was gonna retire. Like I'm like, well, I'm gonna buy a house, and it's just so much money. It was an insane amount of money for an 8-year-old. And then every summer after that, and the culmination of that whole story, to put a pin on the end of it, was one of my former girlfriends that I was dating. Their family owned a ranch that was about 20 miles kind of outside of Centennial. I don't know how that connection happened. And I was like, oh my God, I have to go back and just have like a piece of pie or something like that
Yeah.
at Murph the Surfs. So we go in there, and the waitress comes up to me and she goes, Nathan Reid. And I went, now I'm 22 at this point. Okay. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And she goes, I worked the bar when you were waiting tables when you were like 9 and 10 years old. And I was like, well, first off, we're talking about a 12, almost a 13-year gap.
Yeah.
So that's how small that town is, that I would still be recognized.
And at least a foot of growth.
Oh yeah, just like you think that you're a completely different person. So needless to say, I have been doing this forever, forever.
I
Yep.
love how you acknowledge because there is a romanticized outlook on working when
Yeah.
you're a kid. I mean,
Yep.
I am a flaming homosexual. So when It's a Living was in syndication, I
Uh-huh.
could watch cartoons. Or I could just like watch these women's like these waitresses just like like going into the kitchen and making the side salads while dishing the dirt. And I was like, I want to do that. Saved by the Bell. I
Yeah.
wanted to work at the Max. I wanted to be Kelly Kapowski. And even the women that I talked about this Millbrae House of Pancakes that I grew up going to that knew me when my mom was pregnant with me, and
Mm.
all through my college years. I actually was just up there the other week, and it was kind of sad because they've all since retired. It's a
Yeah.
brand new group of people, but you start to see it's still the same place where families go to, and new waitresses will be having these memories with these kids and whatever, but it is romanticized. And so at 8 years old, you're like, of course I want a job. I want to make
Yeah.
$100 for 7 days worth of work.
Yeah. Yeah. You literally like at the end of the week, and you're just like, oh my god, because you like at 8 and 9 years old, you would struggle to try to like find enough stuff to spend that
Yeah,
money on. So it
yeah,
gives sort of a good like it gives sort of like a good idea of like I've always kind of had that hustle kind of mentality. I've never been opposed to hard work, but when you do kind of throw that like as actors, we sort of we're the quintessential. We jump off a cliff and we build a parachute on the way down. It's the amazing analogy of just like you fucking figure it out. Like there are so many times when we wouldn't even ask if there was on the job training. Like the on the job training is like you show up, if there's a uniform, you get the uniform, and then it's like cool, go take care of table 12, and you're like, have I even seen the menu yet? Like there's.
12.
And so I always said this, and I love this aspect, is I am a terrible server. I am awful, but I'm fun. So, like, I kept my job because I'm always, making jokes and cracking things at the table, whatever it is. But if you got your order correctly, that's a lucky day, man. It's a good day. I'm the person where they're like, okay, so I'll have this and this and this and this and this and this, and I was like, got it. Then I go back to like type it in, and I went, he said, wait, there
He said
was
that and that and that, right? That and that and
there
that,
was
not this, isn't
there
this.
was I can't. Honestly, I can't tell you how many times that I would just go back and I was like, I was listening in Spanish. Can you tell me again what you were? You know what I mean? And I would always just find that way of like giving myself just a little bit of grace. So yeah, that's I've done this forever. Yeah.
That's amazing. I used to say that I wait tables the same way that I date. I'm no longer dating. Just want to make that clear so that
Yeah.
these sound clips don't get out of context. But I say I wait tables the way I date. I lead with personality. That is
Yeah.
my it is the best way to do it because you
Yeah.
can be as skilled, you could be as desirable or whatever you want, but the personality really saves the day. Even so much so, I worked at a place in Chelsea, and one of my first few shifts, I was not really qualified, but they took a chance on me.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my first shifts, everything hit the fan. It was a 4th of
Mm-hmm.
July, and they usually now, from here on out, from that then on out, any holiday, they just did brunch service because they did breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they learned that people came, everyone's off on 4th of July, and there were people from breakfast still waiting for their pancakes at lunch. And it was just like a shit show. Everything went wrong. And my manager just looked at me, and she knew that I was the person to send in. And she goes, just make them happy,
Yep.
just make them happy. And
Yep.
I'm like, I mean, free drinks, free whatever. I made fun of the kitchen. I made fun of myself. And it really does have even the personality, I think, is more, you can build a skill set. You can
Yeah.
build, you can learn new tools, but you can't learn charm.
Yeah.
Um, so speaking of tough shifts, is there a tough shift
Yep.
that lives right? There we go. Do it. Do it. I'm not going to ask the question.
The place has since closed down, so I'm going to talk so much smack about them. So, in my Los Angeles days, there was a sushi restaurant that was on the Sunset Strip as you were heading towards the House of Blues, which is actually also no longer there. And it was called Miyagi's. And it was just a 3-story horror house, also horrors. They were there too.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go be like a barback. Mind you, I've never been a barback before, but I didn't care because I was like, I don't want to serve anymore, right? Like, I was like, I can't deal with the people. Maybe I'll just stick myself behind the bar. Yo, if you get bartenders on here and barbacks, they have their own side quest. Like, it is literally like there's the front of the house, and then there's the back of the house, and then there's the shit that the bartenders and barbacks talk about. And when you want to talk about that we hate people, because we deal with their drinking personalities and whatever it is. But I digress. So there was this barback section where it was like we kept everything cool, we chopped up the limes, we did the barback stuff, right? And I open up imagine like a big drawer, you know what I mean? Of like, oh, this is where we keep all the beers. And I open it up and I was like, oh, where are the Heinekens or whatever it is? And they're like, oh, they're underneath the Coronas. There's like a stack of Coronas, stack of Heinekens, whatever. So I was like, cool. And I reached down there and it's this thick of mold. And I went, I'm sorry, what the fuck is this? And the manager said to me, oh, that's always been there. Just grab a beer and wipe it off. And I went, no, I'm not going to do that. I was like, that's actually illegal to do. And they're like, Nathan, do you want this job? And I was like, not really. So I'm going to clean. So there's no barback. So I'm the barback that's supposed to be stocking 3 levels of a bar, right? And I just went, fuck you. I'm cleaning this thing. So no bar they don't have limes. They don't have beers. They're running out of everything. The manager is like, Nathan, I'm going to fire you. And I was like, that's okay. I'm going to clean. And I literally took 2.5 hours and I cleaned the entire thing, sanitized it, threw away all the beers that were in there and just like top to bottom. And it was like a deep tub too.
Ooh.
And I got done and I went up to the manager and I was like, cool. So I'm going to see you for my shift tomorrow. And if I see anything like that again, and he's like, what makes you think that you can talk to me like that? I was like, oh, do you want me to call the health department? Because I actually have the number in my phone. And I had looked up the health department of Los Angeles's number. And I was like, I can call them because all of the rags that have the mold on it are actually in a bin that I specifically put in a spot that hasn't been thrown out yet. And I was like, do you want to play a game? Do you want to? And so, yeah, I'm that dude to where like I've never, I was a good employee, but I was not above being like, I'm not that dude. I'm not going to sweep something under the rug that is going to put in people harm's way. Like, there's just so much stuff that we see to where I went, if I took a patron back here, they would be mortified. And what was really funny is I never actually looked at why the place got shut down. I have a feeling the health inspector got in there on some random tip and was like, there are termites everywhere. Like, it was everything that you think of when you think of dirty Los Angeles, like the glitz and the glam and the lights of Sunset Strip, and just held together by mold and duct tape.
Yeah, that sounds like many places in New York too. And I love that you called their bluff, because it really is, as I've mentioned here many times, it's all transactional.
Oh,
It's
God.
all like, let's not pretend like we're not a family,
No.
at all.
Nope.
We can be cordial and I can build bonds. Like, I have people that I work with that we are family.
Yeah.
This group right here, we're family, but you're not my family. I have managers that are part of my family, but this place is not my family.
Yeah.
And the best is just calling out those empty threats and being like, sure, fire me.
Oh,
Are you gonna Are you going to stock the bars? Are you going to do this? It's just those. I love them when it's like, and then what? Then what? They have nothing to say. They have no leg to stand on.
Yep.
And it's such a beautiful. I hope people hear this and know that you do have that power. And we hold the cards. I was working at a place in Chelsea, and it's a place I love absolutely. But it was going through a rough time with the staff, and when I'm a Scorpio. When I'm done, I'm done. And I'm a Scorpio who's half Irish and half Latino, so I get very fiery. And I was just having a moment shutting down this restaurant, and our poor busser, who is just absolutely amazing, such a good heart, he just said, "Hey, recuerda que es por ellos que comemos," which means just remember it's because of them that we eat. And I turned to him and I said, "Mira, ellos comen por nosotros. They eat because of us." And I wanted him to get that because he was such a good worker. He was, if I'm making what I'm making as a server, him as a busser is making even less, and he's doing twice the work. So I
Yeah.
really wanted to just like plant that seed to be like, I want you to not be taken advantage of, and I want you to know that you hold some cards, and there are, if there's 150,000 places in New York for a diner to choose, then there are 150,000 places in New York for the staff to choose. So get it together. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
Um, what are some other things that, you said you wanted to, you talked about your incompetent manager. What
Yeah.
are some of the things in the industry that you're like this close to getting it? Like you're this close to being cool. What are some things that were just a disappointment or a letdown, or it's just like it's so easy if you just do this? What were some of the letdowns that you saw?
Um, this is if I'm going through like all of the, because when you've been doing this forever, like you just have like 2 dozen places that you've actually worked in, and I love
Yeah.
that the majority of my stories all led to me getting fired. Like they're heading in that direction anyway. But the one that and I can love talking shit about them because not only have I made fun of them, but the movie Office Space made fun of them, which is TGI Fridays, which is working when you had to have all the flair. They would actually count the flair. That was a real thing,
Need
right?
more flair.
All that stuff that's in the movie, they were like, we're going after TGI Fridays, right? And like TGI Fridays thought that they were like a sizzler, which is just an insult to begin with. You know what I mean? They were just like thinking that they were a creme de la creme. I was like, we're dressed like circus folk. Like
Yeah.
you have literally entered the circus. And I remember this one great shop, and it was in Orange County, California, and it was cool, and it was like just the vibe was great, and like everybody got along, and we sort of ran it like kind of like a nightclub. Like it was like
Yeah.
we're gonna have a blast regardless of who comes in here. And then lo and behold, when I tell you, like a light bulb turned on, and the clientele just either disappeared or completely changed. It's really weird when we think about like we can't control who walks in the restaurant, right? But you've definitely walked in a restaurant before and you're like, this has a weird, sometimes it has a weird vibe or sometimes it has a cool vibe. So we used to have a cool vibe. Now we have a weird vibe. And we don't know what happened. And all of the servers are talking about it. And so I was talking about the fact that I was like, at this moment, California had passed a law where they were taxing your gratuity whether you made it or not.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
were they,
yes.
they were taxing a percentage of what you sold. So they were taxing it at like 10%. Our gratuity had dropped to 4 because of just the vibe. Like it was just this weird. And so every server's like, I'm losing money. Like I'm physically losing money because of the state that I'm in. And so we created this running joke where the moment that you left the floor, we would find clever ways of insulting the very establishment that we were working in. And you would just come up with, I just got to go work the whorehouse real fast. I'm going to slap myself out for like 2 seconds, but I'll be back. But if you don't recognize me, it's because I've covered myself, and you get the idea, right? Just the most horrendous things. Well, that got back to management, right? And management was like, Nathan, we have to have a conversation. And I swear to God, I can't fix my face when management talks to me like they actually want me to respect them. I don't know what it is about me, but they're like, Nathan, we have to have a conversation. And so I go, okay, let's go have a conversation. Like I will say back to them what they gave to me, and they'll give me this look like, did you just say that to me? And I'll say their inner monologue where I'll go like, oh, yes, I just said that to me. Let's go talk in the office. That sounds fantastic. Right? And in my mind, I'm going, okay, so I'm going to get fired, right? So if I'm going to go out, let's go out in a blaze of glory. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, we have shifts where we show up and we're like, this is going to be a shit show. And we have other times where we go, I'm not going to hide it. And I think that humor, that ability of just going, yo, if a bagel rolls across a stage, I'm going to be the guy that goes, anyone else notice the bagel that rolled? Like, if you don't pay attention to the bagel, I'm now the first person that's going, now I'm just watching the bagel. Now
Yeah,
I'm just.
exactly.
So I'm like that in shifts to where I'm pointing out things that are like, you know, what I remember specifically, like I had this table that I don't know why their amount stuck in my head to where it was like $147.20. And
Yeah.
we were placing side wagers backstage at what the gratuity was going to be. And we were like, okay. All right. So 10% would be $14. Who's got 9? And they're like, oh, no, it's going to be less than that. Like, we were demeaning our own thing of what we were doing. And I think that when you don't do that, I think you go a little crazy because you're just not like, we have to make fun of ourselves. It's
You do.
it's a stupid thing.
It's a coping mechanism, and it's either I put it outside of myself, or and I because I internalize a lot, and I take a lot of pride in what I do, and
Yeah.
sometimes to my own detriment, to where it's like, you know what, this is not like on Saturday. It's exactly what you were talking about, to where I walked in and I was like, it's in the air. It's
Yeah.
I can smell the fumes. This is shit. It's going to be a shit show, and I just had to be like, literally tell myself, this place is not a reflection of me.
Yeah.
This place is how I pay rent and do what I need to get done. And I have two settings. It's either I'm like, let's talk deep shit, and I will say everything that comes to my mind to my staff, to like my staff, my coworkers, to be like, this fucking asshole and blah blah blah. Or I get like really goofy. And on Saturday I was like somewhat in between.
Yeah.
Because the one of the bartenders are not bar manager who is not a manager because he can take tables even though it's illegal for managers to take tables, so he's not technically a manager, but he has like all the authority of a manager. He's always allegedly drunk at work and always allegedly drinking whiskey, and so that kind of sets the expectation, and it sets the bar so that way your staff comes in and they can do whatever they want. And
Yeah.
one of the bartenders, and let me tell you, I'm not a narc. I'm not going to tell on anybody, um, but when somebody tells on themselves, like when you're showing up to work drunk, and it was just clear because she's always drunk at work,
Yeah.
and she's all of her drinks are getting sent back. She's offering information that nobody asked for. She's like telling me like, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, what's his face? Uh, Lee, the Joker, um, uh, Bobby,
Two-Face.
Two
Tommy Lee
Face. Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive, like, I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. She's like, she's telling me why she's an hour late to work because her brunch shift went over and they made her stay until 5, so she had to rush over. And I'm like, girl, I'm pretty sure you got off at 1 and spent that time drinking before you got here. And it was just like, it was such a shit show. And
Yeah.
drinks were being sent back. They were taking 15 minutes was the minimum drink. And one of the tables, it was just, they were my favorite table that night. And I just felt bad that I couldn't give them what they were paying for. And it was like the first round of drinks was like at 20 minutes. And he looks at me and I said, I'm gonna go check on those drinks. I'm so sorry for the delay. And he goes, hey, this is no shade towards you. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but is this how it's gonna be all night? And I just looked at him and I said, tonight? Yes. And he
Yeah.
goes, great, I'll order accordingly. And I mean, he just was it's not that he walked out, he proactively ordered his drinks,
Yeah.
and he was part of it. And I just like, I wish I could have given him more. And they took care of me. It was just a wonderful table. But I'm like, these types of shifts where it's just like, I had to detach myself. I had to
Yeah.
make fun of myself, make fun of the place. This is becoming a therapy session. I'm here to talk about you. But I think you opened that up for me, because it is, you just have to like, I can get fired, and I can know I shouldn't be speaking to my manager this way, but uh, I can't
Yeah.
also miss this opportunity. I can't miss this opportunity to be
What's
this hilarious.
really interesting about the fact of going, like, of all of the places that I've worked at, TGI Fridays, Miyagi's, House of Blues, Murph the Surfs, Domino's, Pizza Hut, like the just the gambit of everything that you've actually worked. Not one of those places is ever supposed to think about me again. Does that make sense?
And they won't.
There's comforting in the fact of, like, we love our horror stories because they're kind of like bad audition stories, right? Like actors, we're not actually supposed to share wins. Like, I don't want to talk about the great fucking audition that I had and I booked the gig and then I shot the gig. Who the fuck cares? No, I want the story of, like, you bombed in a level that is incomprehensible. Like, those stories touch our hearts because in the war of it all, we find each other's attrition. Like, it becomes very cathartic for us, even on an
Yeah.
emotional level, to go, oh, it's bad for everybody. Oh, everybody hates doing this. And there's a really amazing psychological reason of why it's actually really terrible. Is so slavery is supposed to be illegal, right? But this country was founded on it, okay? And was built on it. And it's been racially divided and segregated to one type of individual that has, the white people, that has, garnered its, efforts and all that stuff. So the term server is literally servitude. And so what happens, even on a sub-emotional, oh, you're just ahaing this? On the sub-emotional level is you will get certain clients where look at what their grandparents had. So their grandparents, in having slaves, had servants. And so those people breed, mentality. They walk into your restaurant and you go, why is this person talking to me like they think they own me? Because they think they own you.
For
And
for the
so,
for the shitty tip that they're going to leave, because
right,
those type of
for
people.
the like, okay, so we can all laugh at the fact that if anyone ever says to me, I'm going to take care of you, I am going to shoot them. I am
Because
going
they won't.
it is it's like a weird thing. Like, they think that they're the first person to say that, and also that we immediately hear that and go, oh, I'm getting fucking, like, this is going to be the worst tip that I've ever. Is it possible to leave a negative tip? Is it possible for my bill to be 115 and they leave 105 and I just write fuck you in the in the comment section?
But and that's why whenever somebody, like, if somebody's being a real asshole, I understand this is hospitality. I understand, this is the job we went into, but also understand I'm a human being, as are all my coworkers, and like, you can
They don't
talk
see
shit.
you in one. Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't see you
you
in
can
one.
talk shit to me all you want, but do not dare. This is why I say my order of importance in a restaurant is myself, my coworkers, and then depending on the situation, the restaurant and clients, because I will not allow you to speak to people. And if you're like, I want your name, Sean Patrick Murtagh, and you can find me on IMDb too. Please write a review and tag me. I wish you would. I wish you would.
It won't,
And I've
because
said that before.
they'll forget about you 5 minutes after leaving the restaurant. It's this weird thing to where, I think the great term is, like, survival job, and there's a duality even in that phrase of, yes, I'm doing this job so that I can pay my bills, so that I can do my art, so that I can survive, but also I'm also trying to survive this fucking shift. So it's this weird, like, yeah, it's a survival job, but great thing is, like, just you're going to war, and in the laughing at it, in the let me share this story or that story or whatever it is. Yeah, I have so many things where, again, I was a bad server but I was a cool person, so I made it you know?
And that's way more important. I'm gonna transition us a little bit right now because I feel like this could be a 5-part episode with all the it's amazing. But you mentioned earlier about being a hustler and jumping off that cliff and making your parachute on the way down.
Yep.
I actually have in my notes that like can acknowledges like, talent recognizes talent, hustlers recognize the hustle. And I have seen you from someone who I have cleaned toilets, I do bookkeeping, I bartend, I wait tables, I nanny, I do whatever it takes to make it happen. And so I recognize that in you. And I know that you've done a plethora of things with brand ambassador, fitness. What are some of the other survival jobs that you have had to supplement or to invest, actually, not just supplement, to invest into this amazing career of yours?
I think that your listeners are, if you're listening to this on the subway and you're like, you're thinking about like all of the things that you have done, I think a great title to put under that is "What Haven't I Done?" And the joke of going, how much do strippers make again? I mean, we like at the point of going, like, okay, fuck, we're just gonna go into this, all right? I'm gonna get in so much fucking trouble. Okay, here we go. Okay, so one of our very, very good friends is a financial dom. And if you don't know what that is, it is literally a woman that, much like a dominatrix, has clients of hers, none of whom that she sleeps with, where literally she walks over or goes over to their house and they are holding up cash, sometimes in the amount of like her rent in a day, and she controls their money. Okay? Yesterday, my wife and I were literally like, she was like, maybe you could be a financial dump. I mean, the logistics of how we had that conversation, like it was like, so who would I call? You know what I mean? Like you're battle planning something. So I think first off, you have to umbrella that with kind of, what haven't I done is like, I've hosted for crowds in front of 15,000 people at the Lowdown Hudson Blues Festival. I have been a fitness model, a body part model. I've been, in fact, this is a great thing. Everything that I have made fun of, I have become. So I used to have this really funny joke in high school where I went, if you're a butt double, what does your headshot look like? And that was funny because I was legitimately like, but if you are a butt double, like, what is your resume? Like, your resume would technically have to. My friend, I have been Aaron Paul's butt. I have been Damian Lewis's butt. I have been Luke Wilson's butt.
I am going to go make a playlist right now.
Because it's between $1,200 and $2,400 a day. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know what I mean? Like, of all of those things that I have done, and again, I respect the stunt community. I've hired in the stunt community. My last sci-fi pilot had all the guys from the Marvel world as stunt people. They are the most ridiculously and amazing people. And I literally, this must have been, God, like 2013, 2014, I went, wait, how much do stunt people make again? Because again, I've always been athletic. I've always been like, understood my body in a sense of like, I was always very interested in kind of like free running and like whether it was skateboarding or BMX biking. I was always the guy who was like, oh, I'm going to go off the ramp at full speed just because I'm white or, or whatever it is, white people doing stupid shit. And I landed David Guetta's, who's like his international DJ. I landed his stunt double in like 2 of his music videos. And one of it was like me being dragged by this crane. And that started my work with cranes. Like, it's like, so there was always this sense of going, once I found out what something paid, if it kind of took care of life or whatever it is, no, I'm not going to, I'm not a stunt driver and I'm not trained to be a stunt driver. So I'm not going to tell a stunt coordinator that I'm a stunt driver. Does that make sense? So there is a gap on sort of what you can kind of get away with. Like I just stunt doubled John Hamm in his last Apple Plus TV series, but it was him diving into a pool a couple of times. Like, and it was just, you know, because it was raining out. They didn't know, like, you know, are we going to deal with lightning? So it was like I was on standby, like just in case, right? So I booked that gig just because my body's in ridiculous shape and I'm 6'1". So
Yeah.
all of those things, I think for your listener is that I go, whatever is paying you, dear God, if it is paying you well, who the fuck cares? I just remember that I've been a go-go dancer. Like all of these things. And I'm not kidding you. I literally became a go-go dancer because I was like, wait, how much do go-go dancers make? Like everything started from, wait, what? Like that kind of thing, right? Like my hosting work is now, I don't know, like 4,000 a day, depending on, you know, what the sort of the gig is.
Yeah.
I did Kevin Hart was actually, he was doing his recent tour, and they needed somebody to promote. He's got a new animated show that's called Little Kev, right? And it was like, oh, Nathan, we need somebody who can like talk to people about the show, like at his tour, and also like PR it and whatever it is. And I was like, so hire me as a brand host, and how about you pay me this amount of money? I just literally like quoted them what I thought was fair. And they were like, well, Nathan, we actually want to pay you more than that because we need you to like staff it as well. And I was like, cool. How many people
Great.
do you know? And that idea, that mentality was, I mean, I could have a whole freaking podcast on, you know, kind of getting paid what you're worth type of stuff. And, you know, going after, I guess if I had to really summate it, is that we can all agree that $30 an hour is not good money. $40 an hour is not good money. $75 an hour is not good money. $100 an hour will allow you to survive. And when
Yeah.
people are like, Nathan, what do you mean? As I was like, well, the aspect that people aren't accounting for yet is like, if I ever do a gig, I'm losing $25 an hour to childcare because my wife's in a Broadway show. So any amount that I'm getting, minus it by 25. I can't work 30, 35, 45, 55, 75. I can't work any of those amounts because I'm paying cash. So I'm getting, if I'm doing a $35 an hour gig, I'm getting taxed at 35, which is at a 30% bracket. So I have this whole conversation to where I go, and this is at companies. This is why I have such a fuck you towards companies, and they know this, is that I go, stop trying to convince me that that's good money. It's not. And it used to be for Oregon, now no longer. It used to be for Idaho, now no longer. Like there's all these like crazy stories of just like, now it's not about like, you know, we have these war stories where we bond over, but we really don't understand how unbelievably hard it is for the artists that are listening to this, the entrepreneurs that are listening to this, whatever it is, to go, how the fuck do you like,
How do you get out? And it's important to have these war stories. They have value, but it's not, or not, it's not important to have them. We have them and we can commiserate and we can share them, but you don't want to seek out these experiences. You don't want to live in them like I am with my current restaurant. I'm actively trying to get out of there, but I have to make sure I can pay my bills before I get out of there. But like, you don't want to live in that. You don't
no,
want to live in the shit. So we can acknowledge that but we don't need to glorify or romanticize it. We can laugh at the stuff
yeah,
we've survived at, but we're not going to actively go look for that tomorrow. I'm
yeah,
not going to go like, can I please go clean some moldy cervezas? Like, let me get back to that. And I think it's really important that people know that it is important to be open to whatever experience can help get you to where you want to go, as it has proven with you, to where now you're at a place because you
no,
have been open to any job, that you can be at a place like, I actually know my value,
yeah,
and to kind of establish that for yourself, so that way you're just not living in it, because then you can't create from that type of a place. You can't be someone. It's just not healthy to survive when you become resentful and like, I did this all for, a walk on. I did this all for a whatever, and then it like sours the dream. And it's like, by all means, whatever it takes. If it takes telling your boss to get fucked, if it takes
Yeah.
calling out to sleep in, do what you need to do to protect the dream. And you can amend the dream and change it and whatever and grow with it or leave it behind, whatever's natural, but do it from a place of speaking to your soul.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm glad you brought that up. Um, hey there, just checking in. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. And if you are, why not leave us a 5-star review and a comment or two wherever you're listening to this from? And don't forget to follow us on social media at TUFF SHIFT Podcast. That's TUFF Shift Podcast. Everywhere, literally everywhere. And just a reminder, gratuities not included, but tips are always welcome. And you can find our virtual tip jar at tuffshiftpodcast.com. That's TUFF shiftpodcast.com. All right, back to the show. Now, as far as amending the dream and growing with the dream and setting your worth, we all start out, we want to be actors, we want to do this and that. And you transitioned into not just being an actor and someone who's in demand and is called in and is respected in this industry, but you also became a creator. Where
Yeah.
did that switch from just like actively seeking,
Yeah.
jobs to then be like, I'm creating jobs. I'm creating a job for myself. I'm creating a job for my friends. How did you find your way into writing and producing?
What's fascinating, and you kind of talked about, and I'll loop this back to you, is that you go, a hustler notices a hustler, right?
Mhm.
And so anytime, and you're doing, by the way, you're doing this sort of the right way. I'm going to kind of like preface this with, I do get asked a lot about the producing angle, because by the time someone sees it, they're seeing the end of 4 to 5 years worth of work. And
Mhm.
4 to 5 years, not only of working for free, but like my sci-fi pilot went $35,000 over budget. I don't know if people can really because 35 grand, yeah, that's a big chunk of change, right? Especially for artists or whatever it is. I broke it down when I went, oh my God, if I was working a $75 an hour job, how many hours did I have to work just to pay off that tab? So it
Mm.
really put into perspective of like, I was paying that to pay the finishing on the post. We did obviously 2 pickup shoots, whatever it is. Now, mind you, I'm talking about sound stages, Marvel stunt crews, visual effects department that did John Constantine, and you know what I mean, like insane style of stuff. But the big overall picture, there's an amazing interview that Matt Damon was he does, those talkbacks where it's like, it's him and another interviewer, and it's usually in black and white when they put them out, which I think is a great touch. And he was talking about him and Ben auditioning for Primal Fear, right? And he goes, and we got callbacks. He goes, which meant that we knew that we were doing something right. And he said, but then Edward Norton, I think this is how the story goes. So please, if somebody, needs to, if I'm off on a name or two, this is how I remember it, is that he said, we got callbacks and Edward Norton got it. And then he goes, Ben and I were working at the movie theater that we were ripping people's tickets to go see Primal Fear. And of course, Edward Norton's career just skyrockets. And him and Ben had this sidebar meeting where they went, there are only so many Primal Fears that are going to come up, right? And the actors lists, which on a producing end of things, if I had the Cliff Notes version, is that I go, certain actors are worth a certain amount of money, and what they're talking about is they're talking about what a country will pay for that name in a movie. So
Mm.
John Cusack doing a $2 million horror movie is worth a certain amount in France and a certain amount in Russia and a certain amount in blah. That's called foreign pre-sale value, right? So in my brain, I went, oh, so the goal is to get on that list, right? The goal is to get, right, and the insane amount of work that you have to do in order to get onto that list. And so I had this aha moment because I went, all of your listeners that are watching this go, oh, so I know Nathan's credits, but I don't know Nathan. I may have seen one of his commercials, but I don't know if I'm 100% sure because I'm not like the Verizon guy, or I'm not like the State Farm guy, which is a whole nother conversation of like, do you actually want to do that because you're pigeonholed for your career? You get the idea, right? And so I go, oh, I look a little bit like Bradley Cooper. I have a Ryan Gosling vibe, and no one knows my name. Okay. So that means that in foreign presale value, in movies, I'm never, ever going to get those opportunities. Ever. Because they can't finance the films. And once you learn
Mhm.
about how films are sold and all this stuff, and, our complaints of like, all right, I have a complaint. You want to call it that. It's like most of you have seen the commercials for the new Paramount Plus series, Mobland, with Tom Hardy, Helen Mirren, and Pierce Brosnan. I'm sorry, I said those three names and you went A-list star, A-list star, A-list star, doing a TV series. So I never saw the breakdowns for Mobland. I don't know if anybody saw the breakdowns for Mobland. Do you see the understanding? And so I look at, that's sort of a great example of like, ooh, I don't know if I would have, that doesn't help us as artists. I think what
Yeah.
helps us as artists is like 1923, which is Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren, and I don't recognize a single other person in that entire show. They all have series recurring, some have series leads, but you don't know their names. And a couple of those guys, the guy that plays Harrison Ford's son, because I don't know his name. Do you see the point now? It's that one guy in that one thing. He now has two. I think he's got a movie with Sydney Sweeney, and he's got a horror movie where that he's coming out. And I go, oh, dude, the guy from 1923. So
Yep.
you're seeing now a jump, right? Because you finance and get the entire series greenlit off of the Harrison Ford Helen Mirren thing. And so I looked at that formula and I go, I will probably never be Harrison Ford, right? There's a level of the industry and understanding of that industry to where I go, I want to work. So if I want to work and I want to work in good stuff, is you're going to have your auditions for your FBIs and your Law and Orders and your right? And the thing that I always tell actors is that I go, once you've done Law and Order, let's say you have a really big co-star, a really big guest star, you can't come back on Law and Order for like 3 to 5 years. It used to be like 10. I think they just shortened it to be like 5. My wife was on FBI 3 years ago. Casting just called her in for a really big part. And so she went, oh my God, I've reached that threshold where FBI is calling me back again. But again, that means that, she actually had to turn it down because of her Harry Potter schedule. She was pinned for the actual role, but anyway, she was like, had to go on, the show wouldn't let her out, but casting was like, we are bringing you back. But again, if she has a massive co-star on FBI, she's right after you're done, you're right back in the grind.
Yeah.
You're right back in that same grind. So
You're in the pool that they're looking into.
yeah.
And that's what you want to get into that pool.
Yeah, so I looked at the creation and I went, okay, so the wheel, if you're looking at it like a pie, is that I go, A, everyone's going, where's the money coming from, right? Because that's the hardest part. No one's sitting around being like, I have all this money and no script to put it into, right? Like no one's doing that, right? And so I went, can I learn how to go get the money? And I did it all wrong and backwards and went under budget and had to, like, I've lost so much money in producing, and that's a kind of a part of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like you go, maybe that was the learning ground, right? Maybe that was, a part of, not that I would have to choose doing it that way, but I go, I can now step into a project and go, all right, I can actually, even before I start to raise a single dollar, bring in like 3 to 4 showrunner friends of mine, have them take a look at it, pitch basically like the back end of like, well, where is this? Is this going to be an Apple Plus series? Is this going to be whatever it is? And that's not even guaranteed to actually happen. But
Yeah.
I'm willing to throw myself into the fire of going, if we're hustlers, if Sean's a hustler and I'm a hustler, is that I go, okay, that means that I'm the captain of the ship. That means that if the ship succeeds, it's my fault. And if the ship sinks, it's my fault.
Yes.
And I swear to God, there's so many executive producers that literally hate me. And that's not an over exaggeration. I am literally not liked. And that is a part of project creation, because there has to be somebody that when the project doesn't go as planned, or you get fucked over by a distributor, and you know what I mean? Because that just is rampant and whatever it is. And I'm no joke. I'm literally right now helping a $700,000 movie that's in post right now. Great cast that they got. They actually have a couple of decent people that are in it that'll help get it to where it needs to go. And the reason why they hit me up was not, oh, Nathan, let's talk about what my movie is going to do. They went, oh, Nathan figured out how to fall on his face. Let's chat with him, because all of his friends now, in the hustle of it, is like, my first call was to Andy Palmer. Andy Palmer has 15 movies underneath his belt. He is a seasoned director and producer. Directed movies from $1 to like $4 million. And so I went, Andy, let's take a, you know what I mean? If you have time, take a look at this movie. They're looking for distribution. They're looking for blah, blah. So it's like, I'm climbing up the totem pole of going, here's what's really funny. And if you can look at the big picture, and I can't teach this to actors because we're actually ingrained not to think this way, is I raised just shy of $150,000 for a project, put in 30 of my own to get it done, showed people the trailer, and it was the most jaw-dropping thing people had ever seen, because the visual effects were insane, and it was like, oh my God, when is this project going to come out? And I went, I want you to think about the trailer. And they went, okay. I said, did you see me in it? And they went, no. They're like, Nathan, why aren't you in the trailer? And I went, okay, this is literally like kind of acting 101, is that I went, as actors, we want to be in the trailer. We want to be seen. We want to get acknowledged for all of our work that we did. I worked for 5 years on that for free, and assembled the entire crew and negotiated with the visual effects house and did all the contracts and did all of this. Nathan, how come you're not in the trailer? Because I want to be in the fucking series.
Yep.
And if I can sit down and talk with actors, is that I go, here's the part that will rock them. The part that I wrote for myself is not the lead. He'd be like third or fourth on the call sheet, right? The conversation that I'm already having is, Nathan, when you go to pitch that to Apple Plus or Netflix or Amazon or whatever it is, what if they won't let you have that part? And I said, yeah, I'd be down. And their minds are just fucking blown. And they were like, Nathan, why would you? And I said, because you are entering the major leagues of project creation, and you have so less power than you think you do. You know, you hear amazing stories from Issa Rae and all of these producers that like said, fuck you to Netflix or whatever it is, and then went and got an awesome deal from HBO. And we will do that, right? But I wanted to be in the sense of going, my goal is to get to the conversation.
Yes.
If I can get to the conversation, look, we'll have a chat. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, Nathan, we can't give you this role because your name's not big enough and you haven't been, you know, your TV credits are great, but you haven't been a series lead in something like this. And I go, okay, so bring me on as a co-showrunner. I want to maintain 50% control of the entire franchise, and I want back end for the residual aspect, which will probably make me, let's say, over 7 figures. And I go, if I'm going to get fucked, do you know what I mean? Like, I want to get fucked on my own terms. And there's so many times that people think that they're going to stick to their ideas and they're going to like, no, all this stuff. And I go, man, you don't have that power yet. And your ego is, you want to be in the trailer. You want to be seen, or you want to whatever it is. And what I want to do is I want to create something that's so fucking badass that if I could sum this up in less than 30 seconds. I had a group of filmmakers that I was copying off of because they were doing $125,000 3-minute pitch films. Like, it was, what they were doing was absolutely insane. It's Rory Robinson, McGregor, and a couple of other guys that I'm still tracking their careers, and you can find them online and whatever it is. And I remember a trailer that they did for a project I was involved in that at the time was called Core, Kor and the number 3. I hope I don't get in trouble for this. They released the trailer, and Warner Brothers, I think this is how the story went, sent them a cease and desist letter because they thought that was a movie that they had already shot, and they were like saying, we're going to sue you because you took our movie and put the trailer online. And then they did enough digging and actually found out that's not their movie. And it's
wow.
And it's not a complete movie. It was literally like if I had shot a trailer for District 9 and showed you that trailer and you went, oh my God, when's the movie come out? And they're like, there's no other footage. It's like,
That's it.
That's it. And so that was my training ground. That was kind of what I saw on the hustle aspect of things, to where, you know, when McGregor initially came to me about the project, he was like, Nathan, this was out in LA. He goes, Nathan, I hear you're kind of like the master of things, of just kind of like creation or whatever it is. And I was like, yeah, what do you need? And he goes, I need an abandoned hospital. And I went, no. The insanity of what the permits would look like for that alone. And again, I'm crazy enough to think that, and this is what I actually did, it took me 4 days to find it. And
Yeah.
I think it's since been demolished, but there was an abandoned hospital that you kind of weren't allowed to shoot in because they were obviously worried about kind of like, I mean, there's got to be mold there. There's got to be, there's got to be whatever it was. And I literally got in touch with the person who had bought, like, I think it was like either he bought the land or like he had the like, he's like, I own the hospital, but mainly like I own the land or whatever it is. And I was like, how about I just throw you in this movie and you let us shoot at your place for whatever it is? And he was like, yeah, that seems cool. And I'm like, the insanity of thinking that, like, I don't even remember how I found him.
Yeah.
I just think that I was crazy enough. In fact, if I'm actually remembering correctly what I did, I think I literally drove there, talked with the, it was like I talked with the security guard that was like outside and was like, how do I find the fucking person? Like, what are you guarding? Like, the thing is abandoned. Like, why are you here? Who is your boss? Type of thing.
Exactly.
And so I was always that guy that was willing to do that kind of grunt work. And I think one of the things that McGregor kind of saw in me is that he goes, this dude is an actor. And he got us an impossible location. I got him like 10 of like the coolest SWAT people ever. I think he had the SWAT gear from another situation. I cast one of the actresses that he was like, I can't find. I was like, this girl has to be a combination of like a robot and a cat, and like just look wise of what he was going for. And I cast that girl. And then we got to like going and doing the movie. And he was like, Nathan, you haven't asked to be in this. He's like, you haven't even been asked to be paid for the location scout stuff. And I was like, that people that do that are playing the short game. Do you know what I mean? You want the immediate remuneration. You want I don't want that. I want the relationship. And here's what bonkers, and what I think is why I'll still maintain and have a career is, McGregor was just the DP on a Gerard Butler movie, and he shoots all of these like crazy ass commercials and whatever it is. I have not shot a project with McGregor since doing all of that stuff like 13, 14 years ago. And usually the question that I get from people is, well, if you have this connection, right? Like why haven't you kind of brought that into fruition? And I will give you guys the answer to that story in an answer that I never thought was coming. Okay.
Hmm.
So 4.5 years ago, I got asked to stand in and photo double for an A-list celebrity. I didn't even know who it was at the time. I showed up on set. It turned out to be Ryan Reynolds. Coolest dude ever. He's become like family. His whole production company has become like family. They took care of us and my son. There's stuff that like I can't even get into of how much we love that man, because my son, who has autism, you get the idea, right? Like what he has done makes no sense. And I have stood in and photo doubled over 225 commercials,
Wow.
Ryan, over the last 4.5 years. And along the way, I said, and I told people this, I said, I've never asked for anything. I said, they don't owe me anything. I never know if they're going to continue to bring me back. They have. They've become like family. They've bought my son books. They're the coolest people that you could ever imagine. And someone would think to themselves, well, Nathan, if you're like Ryan Reynolds' guy, right? Like, why didn't he bring you in to like work on Deadpool Wolverine? And I said, you're asking the wrong question. You're thinking that he owes me something. You're thinking that just because I've shot 200 commercials with him, that he's indebted to me. Do you have any idea how much I've made doing 225 if you just called it that, if you were just like, I just show up, I do my thing, I'm fine. We're the only production company that shoots between 8 and 19 commercials in one day.
Yeah.
And I get paid per spot. And we just worked together again 2 weeks prior. And so somebody would be like, oh, okay, so that's the long game. No, that's not the long game. And so back in November, producers came to me and they were like, oh, Nathan, we're upgrading you to an on-camera principal for one of the Mint Mobile spots. And I was truly floored. And anyone else would have been like, whoa, shouldn't they have done that earlier? No, they don't owe me anything. And you got to get rid of that mindset of like the guy who owns the restaurant that you work at doesn't give you a percentage ownership of the bar just because you're the bartender. Do you see what I'm saying? It would be insane if you thought that he would. And so I went, I'm not owed anything. They're cool. I just show up. I do my thing. You know what I mean? Like no one's inviting anybody over for dinner. You get the idea, right? And they go, yeah, you're going to do this spot with Billy Blanks. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And they went, yeah, when we were in the production meeting, we were like, wait, isn't Nathan like ripped out of his mind? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, cool, cast Nathan. And I went, great. And then this is on a Friday, we're having this conversation. And then I went, well, is it just me and Billy? Are we just working out? And they're like, oh no, we were going to look at some other people. And I was like, well, who are you looking at? And they're like, why, do you have somebody in mind? And I was like, yeah, my wife. And they were like, oh my God, your wife's in Harry Potter on Broadway. That's right. Can she get us an audition in the next like 20 minutes? And I was like, bet your ass she will.
Yes, she can.
Sent an audition from literally the stairwell at the Harry Potter Theater in costume or whatever it is. Sent it, got cast. So they're like, cool, we're going to shoot that commercial on Monday. And I went, awesome. Monday rolls around and we were doing this co-sponsorship, coolest thing ever with F1 Racing. Because one of his companies, Mountain, had partnered with F1 Racing. So they literally had the actual race car in the soundstage. It was the coolest thing ever. I was like, cool. So we light the thing. We're working with this great director named Jeremy Raccoon. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right, who had just shot with DiCaprio and like, major commercial director. And so Monday rolls around and they're like, hey, Nathan, do us a favor. I was like, what's that? And they were like, once you're done shooting the Mint Mobile spot, you're going to need to shoot the F1 spot as well. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, we didn't want to tell you until today, but Ryan's going to give you the commercial. I was like, Ryan's going to give me the biggest budget commercial that I've ever been in, and you're going to make it look like I'm actually in an F1 racing spot? And they were like, yeah. So I shot 2 on-camera principals. I stood in for 6 commercials and did 3 infomercials in one day, which I never asked for. They didn't owe me nothing. And then 2-3 months later, whatever it is, I was back on set with them, and they were like, "So Nathan, what's happening with the F1 spot?" And I said, "I'm going to tell you guys something from my heart." As I said, even if that commercial never comes out, I'm actually okay. I said I was put into consideration for something that I wasn't owed. And had they put out, can you imagine if they put out a casting breakdown for somebody who was going to be Ryan Reynolds' body double? They could have gotten Ryan Gosling. It would have been probably funnier if it was like, yeah, I decided not to do it, so I got the other Ryan to do it. And it's, you know what I mean? Like, there were so many other ways that could have gone about. And I just said, I don't know if it'll ever come out, and it's not my job. You know what I mean? And if they decide, and the commercial comes out, and it like changes the trajectory of my career. Like one of my buddies was like, "Oh yeah, I was just working with Ryan Johnson, the director of Knives Out," and I was like, "Oh, you got to see my buddy that's in this F1 racing commercial," and Ryan was like, "Wait, wasn't he on set for, you know, because I was working on something else?"
Yeah.
You mean like, and I think all of those things happen because I go, nobody owes me anything.
That's a huge thing, and I think there are a few things to live by in there, and I feel like I was taught this lesson by having my immigrant grandparents and my parents who had such an intense immigrant story that it felt like I was raised by immigrants, is understanding that nobody owes you shit. That is something I say all the time. Nobody owes you anything.
Yeah.
And playing that long game is not, you don't play the long game looking for when you cash out.
Get the
It's not
long
when I
game. That's
get
so perfectly said. Yes.
you
Don't
never
play it
you
like,
you never cash out. It's ongoing. That's why it's a long game. So when it's done, it will be done on its own. And I on a much smaller scale, not at the level you're doing it, but with people who are looking to get their cabaret careers started, looking to get to building their audiences, and they reach out to me and like, how did you do it? I'm like, I'm still doing it.
mm-hmm,
And the thing is actually supporting people is actually showing up for people and understanding that showing up for people doesn't equate ticket sales. It doesn't mean that they owe you shit. And that's always the hardest lesson for people is like, I can tell you, my secret is that I don't know. I just show up for people and I trust. It's not like because I came to your show, because I commented, because I shared, you owe
transaction.
me a, what happens is I think spiritually, energetically, whatever, I show up for these people. And that's my choice. I promote their shows, I see their shows, I give them standing ovations sincerely.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of what they give back to me. It's trusting that then I have to then be open and loving to the people who show up for me. That it's not about this person showing up for me. It's about, oh, somebody else showed up for me and they did that authentically on their own. It's this circle that's not meant to be, I did this for you, you did this for me. It's like I did this and I trust that other people will show up, other people will cheer me on. And you have to really be open to the fact that the people that you least expect it will show up and will support you, and you're like, oh my god, where did you come from? I mean, when I fundraised, when I kickstarted my album, I had people from kindergarten that
Yeah.
I haven't seen since kindergarten show up. And it's not that because I did this I got that, but I do think when you stay in the action of just putting out the support, putting out the love, putting out all of that, and much like this podcast, it's about uplifting each other.
Yeah.
It's not that anybody owes each other, but it's just we're creating the space for that to exist and to receive it back, however it shows up. And it doesn't have to be equal. It just has to continue. So just, and I know this term is outdated and people are sick of it, but it is true. You just have to continue paying it forward. You have to put in the energy that you want to receive. You have to put out. And
Yeah.
so many people do not like that answer because again, they're looking to you and they're like, so X, Y, and Z, and da 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 da. It's like, well, thank you for asking me these very specific questions because I know what to look out for in the future when you ask me more questions for every little success I have and what you think I'm owed or what you're owed from me. So I think there's just so many things to unpack in what you shared with that, and it's absolutely beautiful. So thank you for sharing all of that, and I hope people go back and listen to it a few times to really get Like, I'm just gonna do the work, and I'm gonna trust the work's gonna be there. I'm
Yeah.
gonna show up, and I'm gonna trust that people show up for me, and most importantly, kids, no one owes you shit.
Wow.
So as we were kind of it happens a lot here, and it is beyond what I could have asked for. I have so many things that I write down because I'm always like, I never want to run out of questions. I never know how willing people are going to be sharing of themselves, and there's things that naturally you. You brought up hustle culture before I could. You brought up so many different things, and we're running out of time. And I
Great.
think that's beautiful. I think that's the way it should be, because I would love to have you back to unpack some more things and get a few more takes on other things. But before we go, I want people, if you haven't paused this yet to find him, listen now. And so, Nathan, how can people find and support you in all your creations and all your content and just kind of create the community where we're just making life better for people, even if it's just an Instagram reel? How can people find and support you?
Uh, I'm always, always, always on Instagram. I'm very heavy into like there's probably I would say between 50 and 70 people that I communicate daily through Instagram. So it's Nathan Reid, REID 276, which means that there are, I guess, other Nathan Reeds out there. But you'll that's the easiest way, and I'm definitely a good kind of like vibe check kind of person in terms of like, once I know that someone is a part of that community and a really good person that's just truly looking to connect, happy to, sort of chat with you. Sean and I, in fact, if I was going to do the other subject that I want to chat about, which we'll do in another podcast, is I have mastered, literally mastered with a capital M, how to agent hunt,
Mm,
and literally get like top amazing representation, or how that sort of pitching process kind of works, because what we're taught is like I have all these major wins, and every single time I have a major thing comes out, I will get between 5 and 7 DMs of somebody going, so Nathan, do you like your agent? We'll have a conversation on, well, I won't, because that is prime 101 of never do that, ever, ever, ever. And there is a tact and a technique and a skill into how to do it, and maybe Sean will chat about that at another time, because that'll be
yeah,
such a great valuable thing for them to sort of learn on getting their career to where they want it to go.
exactly. And it'll be a deeper dive into exactly what about the long game, whether it be pitching projects, the not being in the trailer thing. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while.
I'm gonna
Beautiful,
send you the
absolutely beautiful.
literally gonna send you the trailer so it hits your thing, and you're gonna be like, I'm sorry, I didn't think that you were talking about that.
Because like as literally as soon as you started with like, and then did you see me in the trailer? I was like, this guy is so fucking smart. So we know where to find you on Instagram and social media. Um, Now the last thing that I like to do on this podcast, we know as servers, as entertainers, as whatever, bad news always finds its way back and gets a longer life than good news gets, if any at all, which is why I like to go out of my way at work, in rehearsals, wherever it happens, as a customer, to where when I receive something good, when I have a wonderful interaction, when I get support from my coworkers, when I get amazing service, I like to go to the manager and let them know, hey, you've got an amazing staff here. Hey, my coworkers are phenomenal, and here's what happened. Hey, this customer just said X, Y, and Z. Can we send them something? I like to give good news the airspace it deserves. So
Mm.
I want to know who in your many careers, whether it be in restaurants, whether it be on set, uh, in any aspect of your life, has made a tough shift easier for you, and you want to give them a shout out right now.
Um, it's a it's a pivot to that story, and it is helping somebody that actually then became a very good friend. And we are like, oh my God, hey, oh my God, hey. Like, we don't hang out, but we know each other, okay? So remember that 3-story bar that like closed down?
Yeah.
So this guy walks in and he goes, hey, can I talk with the manager real fast? And I was like, my face was like this. I was like, why do you need to see the manager? And he was like, well, because I want to apply for a job. And I went, you're Chad Donala. And he goes, what? I went, you're the lead in Final Destination that's out right now. You are like, you had a series occurring arc in X-Files. You were in Small. I started to list all of his things. And he goes, you recognize me? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, can I get an application? And I went, no. I went, here's what I want you to do. I was like, you run from any place that's like this. You turn around and you get out of here. And I want to run into you however we run into each other later. And I ran into him in New York on a 22, I think it was, episode arc on a major NBC show.
That's phenomenal.
And I was his stand-in. And we bonded in a way that it was like, he brought up that story. He brought up like, I can't believe that you like how did, and of course we caught up and all that stuff. And so that's a great moment of just seeing talent and seeing something amazing in somebody else that is like, you know, who tells somebody else, you know, get the fuck out of here and go and be the massive talent that you actually are. And so I think even on a kind of a smaller scale, we can remind our friends of how talented they are and to keep going. Sometimes we underestimate the power that sort of has because we are wondering, you know, does anybody know that I'm talented or know that I'm doing this shit or whatever it is? And so that acknowledgement that, like, again, doesn't have any kickback, right? You're not doing it because their dad is John Travolta or whatever. You know what I mean? You're not doing it for some reason. You're just doing it to encourage the other person. So that story popped into my head of like the encouragement that led to a full circle thing. And he's a dad now and he's, you know, doing amazing. And we laughed about it because he literally was like, oh yeah, I'm shooting this 22 episode arc. And he was going back to LA after he was done and working at the same bar.
That's crazy.
It's just nuts. Like, it just, because again, there's no quantum leap. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you're trying to survive, it's like up until the point that, you know, you're getting those, you know, 10,000 an episode offers or whatever it is. So it's just like the hustle never ends and love, I guess you could say, the work.
Exactly. The merry-go-round will not stop until it stops, so buckle up and stay hydrated. There you have it. Everybody, let's continue to have moments like this where we uplift each other, we encourage, we push each other in a loving way. And I think one of the things we should remember from this show today is no one owes you shit. All right? Let's think on that. And on that note, I'm going to say this has been another episode of Tough Shift. And just remember, tough shifts build character, and character is what brings your story to life. Take care. Tough Shift was created and hosted by Patrick Murtagh. It was recorded on Riverside and distributed with Buzzsprout. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and maybe a comment or two. And remember, tough shifts build character, and character is what brings your story to life.